Data protection and privacy teams are under more pressure than ever with new laws, AI oversight, data breaches, and the constant expectation to do more with fewer resources.
That's why TrustArc built a modern privacy and data protection management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. It unifies your tools, automates the work that slows you down, and surfaces what matters most right when you need it.
From guided quick actions to our intelligent assistant, Ask Arc, you get credible, contextual answers backed by expert research, not generic AI guesses.
Finally, privacy that works the way privacy pros work.
Learn how TrustArc helps teams move faster with confidence at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.
You're listening to Serious Privacy, powered by TrustArc. Here are your hosts, Paul Breitbart, Ralph O'Brien, and Dr. Kay Royal.
So this week you will have an all-male panel because Kay is traveling. Unless she makes a surprise appearance later on in the podcast, you will just have Ralph and I to discuss a lot of things that have been happening this week, from transfers to revolving doors to disappearance acts to age verification and everything in between. My name is Paul Breitbart.
My name is Ralph O'Brien, and welcome to Serious Privacy.
You took your chance now that you can.
I took the chance, indeed. Yeah, so no Kay this week. No Kay this week to pop us with an unexpected question. Which just shows perhaps I should have come up with an unexpected question in the meantime.
Ooh, I like this one. So, Ralph, there is an unexpected question. There is always an unexpected question. If you could add anyone to Mount Rushmore, who would it be and why? No restrictions.
No restrictions?
Well, apart from the fact that apparently The Rock on Mount Rushmore will not support a fifth face.
Isn't there like a second Mount Rushmore already? Around the corner, I believe, there is a Native American chief who's been immortalized into a rock face. I'm not up on US politics as much as other people, bearing in mind Mount Rushmore's in the middle of the US. I guess you'd have to add a Native American face, because just to reflect that part of the history.
Fair enough.
Yourself?
No, I wouldn't want to be on Mount Rushmore. Sorry, that was too easy. I'm not sure, as I said, I'm not sure there should be anyone else on Mount Rushmore. I think with all these kind of monuments, it's always good to just keep it the way they are and not just go change it. But if I were to add somebody, I agree, it should probably be an American. And if you follow the trend of presidents, then it would, for me, be President Obama.
Obama, okay.
Because he has made a significant impact around the world. Not everything positive. I'm not the fanboy, but he has been, at least in my view, a very engaging president and still very much one of the best speakers I've ever heard speak, even though all those speeches were only on TV and on podcasts. But yeah, I think it would then be Obama.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I've certainly heard him speak and got nothing but positive suggestions there. Yeah, and I suppose if you continue the theme of presidents, how well that would make sense as well. So yeah, and so the unexpected behind us, we should probably turn to the news of the week.
So what is the news of the week?
Exactly. We've got plenty news of the week here. From a UK perspective, I can talk about the ICO issuing their annual report, of course. Now, they used to do a launch event every year where you could turn up and you sit in the audience and they field public questions. But this year, I was surprised. The annual report just arrived. It didn't even really make their homepage. So a lot of statistics that you can look at in there. 42,000 data protection complaints. There you go, 42,000 data protection complaints. And again, roughly 67% no further action, 33% informal action, writing letters, that kind of stuff to controllers.
But without specifying what that informal action actually entails and what kind of legal interpretation they've taken there.
No, what it generally is, and actually, I did actually have a very good conversation online with one of their case officers, because I was a little bit critical, as I sometimes am, saying that the enforcement was negligible, 0%. Actual proper enforcement actions is 0%, essentially, so small as to be infinitesimal. And the case officer was very good in coming back and saying, actually, but we do have meaningful outcomes. If we write a letter and that organization hasn't given someone subject access request rights, normally all it takes is a letter before they then go, yeah, we'll do that. We're sorry, we haven't. But then the ICO thinks it's done its job. It says, but that person hasn't got the rights. Now they have them. That's what they call informal requests. And I think that would typify what those sort of letters sent by the ICO are. You haven't given that person their rights, do it, please. And I guess if people make changes like that, then the ICO considers they've done its job. Me, I would like to consider a little bit more. And I think what typifies it was the announcement on their website today of something that's been under what's known as a super injunction, because we haven't been able to tell anyone about it. And that is the fact the Ministry of Justice had a data leak of over 18,000 people in Afghanistan who was helping the UK forces. And of course, that would place those 18,000 people at risk of life, risk of harm.
Just to clarify, Ralph, this dates back to the chaotic evacuation of Kabul, right, in 2022.
Yes.
We already saw at the time a big data breach at the US Embassy in Kabul because they've left all passport applications behind when all US personnel withdrew from the embassy. And apparently now something similar seems to have happened in the UK Embassy.
Yeah, this is a different one. The MOD was made aware of a spreadsheet, applicants for Afghan relocations and assistance policy. MOD reported it to the ICO within 72 hours. The MOD had an internal investigation. The data related to a small number of applicants in terms of what it could see, but it had hidden data. So again, data in the spreadsheet behind the sort of the result pivot tables and things like that. Yeah, 18,000 people.
Okay.
Now, obviously, that places thousands of vulnerable people at risk, but the ICO's result is no further action again.
Yeah, that surprises and also disappoints a little, I should say, because no, of course, they're not 18,000 UK nationals, but they are 18,000 people who indeed are subject to a vengeful regime following a violent regime change. It is not hard to imagine that they are potential targets for revenge. And then in this case, it was digital data, whereas in the US Embassy, it was hard copy data, just paper. So that's more easily accessible. But still, these are people who risk life and limb and to support the West in rebuilding their country. Then suddenly the old regime takes back over, and they are in the firing line, sometimes literally.
Yeah, even the ICO kind of contradict themselves. It says, we have been clear with the MOD, the incident is unacceptable, it should never happen again. The stakes are simply too high. The public must be able to trust the government has got measures in place to protect personal information and security of the most vulnerable of people. But then it says, the MOD has taken necessary steps and minimized the risk of it happening again, and we're satisfied no further regulatory action is required at this time. So it's a really interesting decision because on one hand, they're saying we're not going to do anything. And on the other hand, they're saying this is really terrible. But it is, as I say, a really disappointing decision. And in line with the ICO's own regulatory policy, we saw a 500,000 penalty for a similar thing with Police Service of Northern Ireland, where, again, hidden in a spreadsheet, serving Northern Ireland police officers were exposed in a similar way that could result in risk to life. Why different in this case? Is it the MOD's level of cooperation or the measures they've put in place, or do they think the risk of harm to people is different?
I think, to be honest, this is worse because of this super injunction you talked about. It wasn't even known that this data breach has taken place. Are all the individuals informed? Probably not, because they probably do not have up-to-date contact details of all those people in Afghanistan. So also there, I'm just really surprised that no further action is taken here for a data breach that could have very significant effects. Whether they've had these significant effects, we also don't know because of this super injunction.
And you're not the only one looking online at the ICO's commentary, and John Baines, another very prominent UK commentator, the commentary is full of data protection professionals just asking, what?
Why?
That's perhaps the most egregious piece of data news for me. And actually, egregious is the word the ICO uses in order to issue penalties. So I deliberately used that word today. The only other piece of news I want to say from my own corner as well is about age verification, which I think is a whole episode in itself. But last year, the UK passed the Online Safety Act, and that includes anyone who has harmful, potentially controversial content online, adult service providers such as pornography, for example, having to make sure that is kept away from children. And so we're starting to see a various number of age assurance providers now starting to be selected and have got to be in place by the end of this month. So Grindr, for example, the LGBT connection application, let's put it that way, and Blue Sky, which is an alternative to Twitter where we operate in the UK, are all implementing various different age assurance mechanisms. Companies like Yoti and other companies like that, where people will have to go to a third-party website, upload a selfie, essentially. The third-party website will check from the selfie whether you're of the right age or not, and using some sort of algorithm, then send you back to that platform with basically a yes or a no.
So no government ID needs to be provided at this time.
There are some that are talking about that, government IDs, but in general, it's mostly selfies, which I do wonder that there's an accuracy level here. Perhaps 75% of the population, it might work, but...
Well, especially if you are between, 15 and 25.
Yeah, when you're on the cusp, so to speak. You might be lucky enough to look very young or lucky enough to look old. Depends which way you want to look at it.
Depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, but as far as I'm aware, without forensic examination, it becomes very difficult to... This is age approximation with a percentage accuracy attached to it rather than a specific yes or no, that person is that age. So what could go wrong, eh?
That's the question. And it's something we are seeing in the European Union as well, because minor protection is also an important part of the EU Digital Services Act that went into effect in 2024. And the European Commission has been working on an age verification application to protect children online. And this will actually be tested from later this summer in France, Spain, Italy, Denmark, and Greece. So those 5 countries will be at the forefront. They will be testing the application. And then on that basis and the outcome of the tests, this will all be included in the EU-wide digital identity wallet that should be available as of next year. So this is in public hands. And this will be based to some extent on government ID verification, but it is not a private service. And indeed, it would also work on the basis of a hit, no hit basis so that it can be used, including by all the social media platforms. And also if countries push ahead with their limitations and age restrictions for social media in more and more EU member states now, that they are pushing for an age limit of 16 before people can create social media accounts. Also then that digital identity wallet from the European Union will actually play a role. More like a public service than a private, than leaving it to the market as the UK seems to do.
There's been a lot of talk here about some sort of government verified ID for a long time, where you can log into a government server and then take that token across to whatever site you're interested in. But, I think as a privacy practitioner, we'd all be concerned with the government then understanding what particular preferences you might have in what particular sites you might go to and linking that to your government ID. At the moment, it looks like these third-party providers, even when they do ask for a government ID, it's comparing your government ID to the selfie you upload when doing that on a third-party website rather than either the government or Grindr or Blue Sky having that data.
Yeah.
All they get back is a simple yes or no. Driver's licenses, passports, army ID cards, pass proof of age cards, they are a part of this, but at the moment, whatever robust age checking techniques look like, it's going to be interesting to see who adopts them, who doesn't adopt them, what the enforcement looks like from Ofcom here for those that don't adopt them, especially on, let's say, more adult websites as well, and whether it will just adopt people who don't want to verify to use a VPN.
And also what the retention is, because in principle, under data protection law, it says you shall not keep the data longer than strictly necessary. that could mean that once the verification is done, the tokens can be deleted. So there is no track record in your government account of all the websites that he visited, because all that data will be immediately deleted. So the government also cannot draw inferences from that if you look at the public service application.
Yeah.
And similar, by the way, for the private initiatives. There is, at least in my view, no need to keep all that data for a long time, because once the verification is completed, the hit, no hit has been shared. It's over. The process is done.
Yeah, I was having a conversation, fun enough, today in a training course about authenticating people for subject access with exactly the same things. Oh, I just asked for driving license and passport, and I just want to put my head in my hands and say, for God's sake, it doesn't say ask for ID, it says authenticate who they are.
Yeah, I just screamed back. Talking about screaming back, there are these data trading companies, right? And they, like Apollo.io, and they sell their databases to anybody who wants to send marketing communication. So yesterday morning, I received marketing communication from a not yet to be named company with the tagline, data subject access requests are on the rise. They send that email to my Jersey Data Protection Authority account. And this is not a company I've ever done business with. This is not something I've invited. So I've congratulated them that indeed they were right. The number of access request is on the rise, and they were the lucky ones to get one from me. Because if they are stupid enough to send marketing communications unsolicited to the supervisory authority, yes, then I'm going to pursue it.
That's impressive. To send it to the actual supervisory authority,
It's pretty stupid.
that's really good. Yeah.
Obviously, I will not misuse any enforcement powers that the Jersey DPA would have, but I could not refuse to just start playing around a little with my rights under EU GDPR, UK GDPR, and the Jersey Data Protection Act 2018.
One more from me then, before I hand over to you, Paul, because I know you've got a couple of burning issues you want to put to the front. But this last one is actually a decision from France, quite a positive decision in my aspect. I've long rallied against self-service supermarkets where there's essentially a camera, and that camera looks at you putting everything in your basket because they don't want to pay their staff and instead want to automate the checkout process. In France, the old your tobacconists, utilizing cameras which do age estimation. We were just talking about age verification as well. And this is obviously for buying things like tobacco and things like that. So we've got cameras analyzing facial features, processing biometric data, on by default, scanning everybody in view without a practical way to object or say no, generally speak. And the CNIL's issued an interesting decision, largely based on accuracy, that the fact that AI can only estimate age, not guarantee it, and errors could lead to improper sales or unfair refusals. Let's track that back to the UK's online safety, as we were saying earlier. It's not necessary or proportionate. It says verify age. It says you could do that with ID checks or digital apps, but not with AI.
Mm-hmm.
Do they add any value apart from checking proof of age from an ID? Probably not. Do they even discourage proper verification? And what about rights? Constant facial analysis in public normalizes surveillance, undermines individual freedoms, even if you're not storing that data. So they're recommending your traditional ID check as an alternative and certified age verification apps as an alternative, but saying that these live facial recognition cameras, are certainly bad practice, not very transparent, and don't really do the job they're intending to. So there's not a lot in that decision I disagree with. I think the CNIL's done a good thing there, but when you apply it to, as I said, age verification online, or certainly what I see in supermarkets when I go out every day to do my groceries, I actually think that CNIL judgment could have large ramifications elsewhere, perhaps.
That would be nice. Yes, actually, absolutely. So yeah, what else is happening? One of the things that's happening, there was a great piece in the Wirecutter from the New York Times these past days, a journalist actually trying what it would be like to disappear from the internet.
Good luck.
Well, yes, indeed. And that was also his conclusion in the end. If you recall, when the GDPR was introduced in 2011, the right to erasure, between parentheses, had right to be forgotten. And rumor has it that the European Commissioner for Justice at the time, Viviane Reding, said the storyline is nowadays that the internet doesn't forget, let's make sure with European legislation that the internet will be able to forget again. And that is why we have stronger erasure possibilities under the GDPR. At least that was her intention. So this journalist was actually an American journalist under US legislation looking for ways to get rid of all his social media accounts, pictures online, all kinds of search history. And he found out that it indeed was a pretty difficult thing to do, and that he also was not very successful because a lot of things either were still required to be able to live his life or were not as easily deleted. Think of all the tweet history or Facebook pages from years ago trying to get all that information. So it was pretty difficult. And still, I thought it was a fascinating story to read. And I'm very curious when a European journalist will actually follow suit and see whether it's different in the EU or in the UK with all the options that the GDPR has, which obviously are a bit stronger than the legislation in most US states when it comes to data deletion.
One of the things I found interesting when you posted the article, Paul, and I'm sure we'll post it on our show notes as well. But one of the things I found really interesting was also social pressure. This social pressure, and also he's then started talking about other people's data. So other people who have posted photographs with him in it. And do I tag them? Do I untag them? If I untag them, will somebody get upset?
Will they get notified because he changed his profile picture on Facebook and suddenly got tons of likes because people got notified that he had a new Facebook profile picture?
We call it the Streisand effect. The idea that when you're trying to remove your data, you can inadvertently publicize it at that time. The act of protecting your privacy might involve you, I don't know, putting in an erasure request. Now the organization's got to keep the erasure request to prove legal compliance. The act of even putting in an erasure request creates records upon you. So it can be really hard. And as we know, even the right to erasure under the GDPR is limited in circumstance. It's got some definite ways that can work with some definite legal basis and some definite situations. Yeah, I think it's incredibly difficult to disappear from the internet. And I go back to that old New Yorker, funny we're talking about the New York Times, that New Yorker cartoon back from the 90s where you got the two dogs and it says, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very modern version of that where it shows the NSA next door saying,
oh yeah, it's a brown lab and he's sleeping with a Dalmatian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think those days are gone. When I first started using the internet, all anybody wanted to know was ASL. Age, sex, location, and you were hidden behind a pseudonymized username on a chat room. And nobody knew anything about you. So how it's changed, and it's very difficult to do anything without leaving an online footprint.
Yes.
And we've actually seen some pushback these days, even from the government, saying, well, you shouldn't be able to post anonymously because we want to make sure you're doing everything properly and you can't bully people without consequence. So, a real names policy on things like Facebook and websites, so people can't hide behind pseudonyms, the world has changed. The world has definitely changed.
And pseudonyms are as old as human life is, because as soon as people started writing, they started writing also under pseudonym.
Indeed. Having multiple accounts, writing under pseudonyms, having different lives. You might want to separate your business life from your social life or your personal life.
Yes, please.
That separation's pretty hard to do.
Look at Severance. They try to do it, and also then it doesn't work.
No, I agree. And it is interesting because you're right. The whole right to be forgotten was, should something that was done 20, 30 years ago be able to affect us later on down the line? I actually found out that there was an amendment to the UK GDPR that I wasn't even aware of this week. There's something called the Victims and Prisoners Act 2023 that basically has amended the right to erasure in the UK GDPR to talk about malicious accusations. If somebody makes a malicious allegation against you and the controller has investigated it and found it to be malicious or done by a malicious person, you're entitled to have that accusation erased. And that's a really interesting little amendment to the UK GDPR under the Victims and Prisoners Act 2024, I want to say. And it mainly looks about harassment and stalkers and those sorts of things. And I must admit, until I was putting together my course for the Data Use and Access Act, when I was looking at the what we call the Keeling schedules prepared by Bird and Bird, shout out to Bird and Bird for their Keeling schedules, I hadn't noticed that amendment at all. Really interesting just how and if the right to forgotten or the right to erasure even achieves what it set out to do in the first place? I think not, personally. I think not.
Final topic of the day, WeTransfer. I think people will have seen the headlines, may have seen my LinkedIn post, which quite a sort of exploded when I posted it yesterday morning. And credit where credit's due, I followed or came across a post from Rami Ismail on Blue Sky, who posted on the new terms of use or terms of service of WeTransfer. WeTransfer allows you to send big files or sets of files or folders across to somebody else if you do not have a data sharing option yourself, and especially if your email account has certain limitations of 20 or 25 MB to share large documents. A lot of people have been using WeTransfer. Started off actually as a Dutch company, but has become in international hands in recent years. And already for quite a while, WeTransfer has language in their terms of service that you will provide them a license to improve products and services. They have updated, or they had updated their terms of service now, effective August 8, 2025, to say that not only you would grant a perpetual worldwide non-exclusive royalty-free transferable sub-licensable license to use the content that people then share using the platform for improving products or services, but also to include improved performance of machine learning models that enhance our content moderation process. Such license also include the right to reproduce, distribute, modify, prepare derivative works based upon broadcast, communicate to the public, publicly display, and perform content without any compensation for the owner of the content, so the file that is being transferred.
So we'll do what we want when we want.
Basically, yes. And they are appropriating your content to do whatever they would like to do with it. So imagine the outcry, right? Posted it to warn people that it is no longer safe to use WeTransfer, but I was not the only one. There is a lot of criticism throughout the day, and later in the day, on the 15th of July, yesterday, WeTransfer withdrew actually their change and restored the text to what it originally was, saying, oh yeah, we messed up a little bit here. This was not properly reviewed, and this was a huge language error that slipped through. I find that very hard to believe, because this is a very deliberate change that you make, and this is not something that you just publish. I know how terms of service and terms of use updates work in commercial companies. I've been involved in quite many of them. This is not something that happens overnight, and this is not something where one person can just make the change. This requires sign-off and double checks and triple checks, translations and all of that. So this doesn't just slip through. Mm-hmm. By restoring the old text, they say, well, everything is right now, but it still is not, because they say we also respect GDPR. They don't. And this is something I'm discussing with some of the people under my LinkedIn post, because they say, oh yeah, but WeTransfer should be able to screen the content because they need to check whether there's nothing malicious. Yes, to some extent, that's true. At the same time, if they don't know whether personal data is included in the content, in the files that are shared, by scanning them, they are processing the personal data, because that's the definition of processing under the GDPR, anything you do with personal data. So also scanning would require a legal basis, and they don't have one.
So they have put up today a WeTransfer Terms of Service What's Really Changing post, where they have gone through and tried to specify your content is always your content. We're not going to claim any ownership to it, which is not what the update said. Mm-hmm. And again, we don't use any machine learning or any form of AI, but they wanted to include the possibility to do it to prevent the transfer of illegal or harmful content potentially in the future.
So they are saying that they check for harmful content manually right now. There is no flagging based on the name of a file or the size of a file. There is no computer involved whatsoever. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah. And apparently their terms are compliant with existing privacy laws, including the GDPR. For a start, the GDPR is not a privacy law.
Data protection law.
Yes, they've got me right there. And the terms can't be compliant, only controllers and processors can, as far as I'm aware.
The terms can be in line with,
Yeah, semantics aside, I do think some organizations, when they're updating their T's and C's, there's some wider lessons to be learned here. You can't just stick in, we're going to use AI to do everything all the time and copy and paste that from some other terms and definitions and throw it out there and just hope that people won't notice, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. But also the purpose for data processing to improve our products and services. The European Data Protection Board has already said in the Twitter Ireland cases that is not a suitable purpose for processing because it's too generic, too vague. People don't understand what will happen with their data if it is being used to improve unnamed products and services. So that in itself is already problematic when it comes to the processing of personal data. And I realize that not every file sent through what we transfer will contain a lot of personal data other than maybe the name and the email address of the person sending the file. But there will be a lot of files that also include names, email addresses, phone numbers, other identifiable information. And they should be careful there. They cannot just appropriate that data to themselves, not even for scanning or analytics or whatsoever, because they are unable, without really reading all the files, to inform individuals, hey, this is something we are processing your personal data. If they want to rely upon a legitimate interest, how are you going to enable a right to object of the people mentioned in a file that they are scanning?
I think that's the next lesson learned, isn't it? Well, we've already said lesson learned, you can't just change your T's and C's and hope no one will notice. But then your other lesson learned is, when you're using a third-party transfer platform or when you're using any sort of software as a service third-party provider, check their T's and C's, make sure that they're legal, perhaps consider not putting personal data across those platforms and having strict policies on what data you can and can't send out to third-party software as a service providers, because I'm sure there are a lot of organizations that may or may not have an official policy where the staff will just use these tools because they're cheap and convenient, right?
In case of WeTransfer, it's even free and convenient. And I have used it in the past. It works. It's easy to use. It's free, but this really requires people to start thinking about how they use these kind of tools. If it's just to share a large image or something like that, or a set of photos from your holiday and your friends are fine with it, be my guest, use WeTransfer, but also be aware that they do give themselves a license to use your content for something else, even though that may not be their current plan as per their blog post. The risk is there. I don't regret warning people about this change. I think WeTransfer saw that indeed they were in the wrong. They have corrected it to some extent by rolling it back, but that doesn't mean that, in my view, their T&Cs are actually what they should be.
Yeah, and I think, again, I just extend that out to the wider software as a service industry. Just be careful where your data ends up in general. With you these days, you just never know. And again, you might not even have a choice. If you now want to use Blue Sky or Grindr or visit any other slightly adult websites.
WhatsApp.
Yeah, potentially. You could argue that you could go on to Twitter, Facebook,
Instagram, anything that allows you to send pictures would then be subject to age verification as well.
Yeah. So, age verification, you might not have a choice using a third-party service provider coming to a app or service near you.
No, and that's maybe in the final words, the CEO of Signal, Meredith, what's her name? I forgot. I'm sorry. But she gave an interview to one of the Dutch newspapers on Saturday. And she also admitted, listen, I also want to live my life. So yes, I also use certain big tech services. I can't say goodbye to all of them also because I do want to stay in touch with my friends. And for example, the Google Calendar just works and it works for me. But this is my choice. I make a deliberate choice in what tools I use and what tools I do not use. And that's how it should be. There should be good alternatives for big tech that are as good and as cheap as the big tech without all the advertising industry immediately being on your backbone and without all the data immediately being analyzed and sold for whatever reason.
If only.
That's a good word to end on. If only.
That was Serious Privacy.
This wraps up our podcast for this week. Please do share the episode with your friends and colleagues because we love to get more listeners. And join the conversation on LinkedIn or on Blue Sky. You'll find us under Serious Privacy on both platforms. You'll find Kay as Heart of Privacy, Ralph as IGR O'Brien, and myself as Europol B. Until next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
If you're a data protection or privacy professional, you already know the pressure. Non-stop regulatory change, AI oversight, internal demands, and the expectation to somehow stay ahead of it all. And the old patchwork of tools just isn't cutting it anymore.
No, that's why TrustArc created a modern privacy management platform powered by Arc Intelligence. The TrustArc platform brings your workflows, evidence, research, tasks, and applications all together in one unified and intelligent workspace so you don't waste time digging, clicking, or context switching.
With Ask Arc, your privacy assistant, you can ask plain language questions about laws, jurisdictions, or even your own program data and get credible, cited answers based on Nimity research and more than 1,000 global laws. It's explainable, transparent, and purpose-built for data protection and privacy.
So if you need to add a vendor, create a cookie banner, or start an assessment, quick actions take formally complex tasks, turn them into bite-sized guided workflows to save you time.
It's a platform that thinks like you, works like you, and helps you move faster with confidence, whether you're a seasoned DPO or you're just getting started.
See how modern privacy gets done. Explore Arc at trustarc.com/serious-privacy. That's trustarc.com/serious-privacy.